We are back. Thank you and welcome to The Opposite Effect. I am your host, Mr. Rami J. What we have now is a very special guest, one of the master teachers. I consider him one of the brilliant minds, one of the most prolific thinkers that America has ever produced. Renowned author, an orator, and a master teacher who uses logic to explain the current state of society. He authored the Uniter Independent Compensatory Code system concept, a compensatory counter-racist code, as well as an accompanying compensatory counter-racist codified word guide. Dr. Neely Fuller Jr., we welcome you to The Opposite Effect. Thank you, and how are you doing today, good sir?
I'm still learning.
Yes, I am still learning as well, Mr. Fuller. That is your signature response. We love it. Today, we wanted to start off by asking you a question about violence in the black community. I personally witnessed 3 young men accost a tourist taking a picture in front of one of Nipsey Hussle's murals. And I just thought to myself, are some of us just programmed to behave in this manner? I mean, where did this destructive mindset begin? Where did it come from?
Everything we've ever learned has taught us to do that. Everything. I mean, everything from killing Indians to black people killing each other, tribal war, and that's all been fed. Black people always contesting each other about everything. Black people, it's a part of, in fact, we practically brag about it as a part of our culture. I mean, oh man, you don't know what you're talking about. How many times have you heard that?
I've seen it once.
10
I've seen it
trillion
a million
times.
times. Yep, that's right.
I mean, always ready to contest each other. That goes with the slave complex. That goes with the effects of the system of white supremacy. Not saying that black people were perfect people before then. We were having tribal wars before then. But the white supremacists have always fed and supported tribal war when it's to their advantage among all dark-skinned people. They have tribal wars among themselves, but when they thought of the idea of white supremacy as the best form of government for all of the people on the entire planet, it became the greatest political and religious force in recorded history as far as what I've been able to see. And so, in coming up with that system, part of that system is to teach people violence, because it's a violent system that we're in. But the victims of violence, we're taught to systematically always think in terms of, if you're going to be violent, pick on somebody that's weaker than you are. So black people look around and they see, well, what I see, the weakest people on the planet are black people. We're always in a begging position. We're always pleading for mercy and pleading for this and pleading to be fed and pleading to be housed, pleading. So we are people who are automatically in line, if there's going to be violence, to be violent. But who are we going to be violent against? Each other. Because the system of racism teaches people, find somebody weak and take advantage of them, using all the violence that's necessary to do so. So black people, as prisoners of war under the system of white supremacy, look at each other and say, well, I can't whip nobody else. I better not think about getting in the white supremacist face, because even my ancestors were great losers at that. So I still want to be a man. I still want to prove that I got some worth, that I will stand up for myself. So I'll just find somebody around here that I went to school with 10 years ago that now lives over there in the other project, and I'll go over there and kill them. And that'll prove at least to one person, that'll be me, that I am somebody. Even though when the white supremacist catches me for doing it, disturbing their peace, I'll plead, and if necessary, bleed for them. Because what else have I been taught? And that's it. But now, I like to talk about also, in addition to that, what do we do about it to start unwinding that process? First of all, just point out just what I just said as the gospel, because it is, or should be, because it's the truth. And then say, well, what's the best thing to do about it? The best thing to do about people who have been brainwashed into going at each other at the least little excuse, or even if it's not an excuse, make up one, is distance. No contact, no conflict. And that's what I've read, and that's what I've written in the works that I put out, called the Code of the Compensatory Counter-Racist Code, what to do about circumstances like violence among black people among themselves. No contact, no conflict. People may have noticed how easy it is to get along with somebody that you haven't seen in years, at least for the first 15 or 20 minutes. Then it begins to break down. The poison starts coming to the surface. If you're black, that poison is going to come out. We all have it in us to go at each other. We've been taught that very thoroughly. That is very, very, very deeply ingrained. That's not something peripheral. That's not something that's just, you really have to dig deep to get to it. No, that's a part of our culture, an essential part of our culture, a culture that we practically brag about, like the song by Muddy Waters, I'm ready. Ready as anybody can be. I'm ready for you. I hope you're ready for me. I got an axe-hound pistol on a graveyard frame. Shoot tombstone bullets with a ball and chain. I'm drinking TNT and I'm smoking dynamite. I hope some screwball starts a fight, because I'm ready. Now, that has been a part of black culture as far back. See, not putting down Muddy Waters. He's just reflecting in a song how we actually are, the black male particularly. And it does, when it's talking about the youth now, no, that goes way back. That Saturday Night Razor in the zoot suit, the barbershop razor went with the zoot suit at the end of a gold chain. It was like a uniform back in the 1940s. So this has been around like forever. Black gangs in Chicago. That didn't just start yesterday. We've been doing that like forever. Weak people do that.
Okay, hold that thought really quickly, Mr. Fuller. We're going to take a quick break, pay a couple bills, and then we're going to come back to touch on more of these profound points with Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. Be right back here on The Opposite Effect. Thank you. Stay tuned. All right. Back here at The Opposite Effect with your host, Rami J. Special guest on the phone line with us. Feels like he's in studio, but he's on the phone with us. Dr. Neely Fuller Jr., author, orator, and master teacher. A man who, oh my goodness, he uses logic, using cause and effect in order to express his points, in order to get people to understand society and the world in which we live, the cultural zeitgeist in America. Dr. Fuller, now if we can be programmed to destroy one another, to hate one another, could we also be reprogrammed to love each other? Would that be a possibility?
we can be reprogrammed, but we're using a vehicle called love without even explaining what love is. Love and justice have the same definition. So it's not going to, we think this hugging somebody in front of a funeral home, that's expressing love. That's expressing this agony. That's all that is. That doesn't have anything to do with love. I mean, that's just pain, crying out like babies in a crib at our situation, and then doing it again next week, and the week after that, and the week after that, and the week after that, and the year after that, and the decade after that, and on and on and on into infinity. Until what? Well, the law of physics says something will continue until scientifically something stops it. That's the law of the universe. So we should tap into the laws of the universe. We've been doing the incorrect things. We have the incorrect response because it hasn't worked. Hugs and balloons and teddy bears won't do it. So what will do it? Well, they say love will do it. That's correct. But we have to have a definition for love, a compensatory, codified definition for love that makes sense. Love is justice. You can't have love without justice. So what is justice? Justice is guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, if we adapt that as a mantra, as a code, our first question is, this meeting that you're going to have, or whatever black people are going to do, a barbecue back in the back of somebody's house, or we're going to have a street party again and again and again and again. How is it going? What's the details of it? See, it's always, progress is always made, or problems always solved, not just broad generalizations, but by the details. Okay, you're going to have a street party. What's the nomenclature of a street party? They say, well, we're just going to get together as black people and have a Juneteenth jamboree. Okay, a Juneteenth jamboree consisting of what? Well, we're going to eat barbecue and hang together and you know, and just be together and celebrate our blackness and celebrate, you know, the time when we were announced in Texas that we were free, and that was the last place to know about it. And so we're just going to look back on it and reflect and all get together and do it. And we're going to eat. There's going to be plenty of food. Yeah. Wait a minute. Been there, done that. And seen a lot of them in a great big shootout. So now, where is this love that's supposed to spill all over the place after we do all of this for the umpteenth millionth time? So, codification says it's very simple. Part of the black code that we invented should be no contact, no conflict, unless you have an absolutely necessary reason for being in contact. That will go a long ways. That's when I say contact, that just doesn't mean large gathering. That means one-on-one contact. Every black person should ask when they're talking to another black person, and the black person say, hey, what about dropping by here the other day? I mean, the next day you come by. And, you know, and we just kind of hang together and whatnot. We use that word hang together a lot. I mean, you know, we need to watch that, too. That puts incorrect ideas in our mind, I mean, at a subliminal level. But that's another story. But I'm saying, basically, that shouldn't be a part of our code. We say, wait a minute. I don't visit people unless there's a specific reason for doing something that's guaranteed to be of constructive value. This so-called, what you call traditional hanging out and sitting on the couch eating and what you call joning each other and making jokes and looking at a ball game and whatnot. That should no longer be a part of the black code of black culture. We should dispense with that. We are in a war. So in a wartime footing, you have a wartime mentality all the way. And all-out war is what we are in. War was declared on us a long time ago, but we have been acting like we are a perpetual party every chance we get. All of our songs reflect that from way back. Sunday morning, my head is bad, but it's worth it for the times that I had. Okay? Drinking or smoking or snorting or whatnot, so you can forget your problems until Monday, because Monday is a mess. On account of our entire existence is a mess. So no contact, no conflict, unless you have a specific constructive reason that's going to produce what? And here's the two words you always look for. Constructive result. You're going to help somebody paint the barn, or you're going to do some of the plumbing over there at somebody's house, because you know how to do the plumbing and they don't. And they don't have the money to hire a plumber. So you're coming over Saturday, and you're going to help do the plumbing. Otherwise, don't come.
Unless they want to have a good time. They just want to have a
good time repairing something. Get that roof fixed on that garage.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Fuller. Now, nowadays, currently, a lot of the younger generation and the older generation as well, they're using social media platforms, their cell phones, their computer screens to interact, to be more social. A lot of it has become, demonic and the devil's territory. But I'll ask you, does what you're saying apply there as well?
Yes, sir. Super. The more devices you have for communication, the least you should use them. I have a cell phone, an old-fashioned one. I mean, it's for emergencies. Or something where I have to call a taxi or Uber or something like that. Otherwise, general conversation, it's not going to happen. Now, I'm on a landline phone now, but even on this phone, I'm talking about solving the race problem, which is where every black person on the planet's mind should be. That's purpose for existence number one, period. Because that's the biggest stumbling block to everything that has to do with somebody who is classified as black. And in most of the cases, you might say, since there's so many classifications, anybody considered to be non-white. According to what? Logic. You tackle the biggest problem first. The biggest problem is racism, but you have to be serious about it. Not just in one area of activity, but in all areas 24/7. Wake up in the morning and go to bed thinking about it. A lot of people say, well, I'm tired of talking about this race thing and whatnot. I was tired of talking about it. I mean, a long time ago. And that's why I got to the place where that's just about all I'll talk about. Why? Because I've noticed by traveling, by trying to do this, trying to do that, the race problem was the biggest problem I was ever going to have on the planet. That's the biggest. If you don't solve that problem, everything else is going to fall apart one way or another. If not immediately, somewhere down the line. If you're black on the planet Earth, anywhere. So that's a priority. That's not some side issue. I thought it was. I tried to make it that. I passed through that stage like I think every black person does, where you're just sick and tired of hearing about it real quick, real early. I want to talk about something else. Something else like what? No, anything else. So I tried talking about other stuff. But it always led back to the race problem, no matter how long I talked. Because we usually wind up talking about one way or another, some problem we have. And there's not a problem that the black person doesn't have that's not attached to the race problem, even when you can't see it right away. In all 9 areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. They're all interrelated. And those are the 9 major areas of activity, in my opinion. Some people say I could have added health and rounded it out to an even 10, but I put that on the economics. Because what is economics? Economics is how you use your time and energy.
Thought right there, Mr. Fuller. We will be right back after we pay a couple of bills here on The Opposite Effect with Rami J. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, and we are back. Thank you for tuning in. We have special guest, Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. here in studio discussing the signs of the time. And when I first heard Dr. Fuller, I was immediately reminded of my grandfather, Sonny Boy, Jewel Don from Arkansas. His cadence, the way he spoke, the logic, the classic wisdom in which he lived. Dr. Fuller, please, in your own words, please continue explaining the concept of economics to our audience.
Yes. Now, these are made-up terms because that's what you have to do in the system of white supremacy. You have to have your own word guide so that you always know what you're doing and what you're saying and what words mean and what they should mean and what they shouldn't mean. So I came to the conclusion that basic economics is use of time and energy, because you come into the world with 2 things that you already have without asking anybody for anything before you even know what's here. You have time because you're here now, so the clock starts ticking. You start heading toward the grave the minute you're born, maybe before you're born. So that's time. And you have energy. The baby bursts forth, lets out a yell, I'm here now. All right? And I got energy. The baby's arms are moving. The little legs are kicking. And they got a pretty strong voice if it's a healthy baby. And they let you know they're here. Okay? That's time and energy. Basic economics. So you start off with basic economics. Things like money and things like that, mediums of exchange, those are just tools of economics. But basic economics is how you use your time and energy. So black people, being a weak people, not having much money or none at all, and not having much of anything, and not having really anything that they can really call their own in the system of white supremacy, because in the system of white supremacy, a black person does not own anything, even when they got papers saying that they own it. The red people, what we call Indians or Native Americans or original people, they got a lot of different titles slapped on them. But, Cherokees, Choctaws, Apache, they know all about paperwork. They got stacks of paper that proves this and proves that. It doesn't really prove anything in reality. Why? Because they're on what they call a reservation, which is just another word for prison camp. Just another camp location in what they once called their territory. So they do the same thing, the white supremacists. They just got different names for it. But they do the same thing with all people of color. That's what white supremacy means. So they tell us what economics is. That economics has to do directly, always, with money with their pictures on it. And pictures of people who really, most of them, were obviously, and they bragged about it at one time, they're kind of acting ashamed of it now, slave owners. More slaves, the more valuable the money, I guess. Anyhow, that's what economics is, according to us. Use of our time and energy. And all of our time and energy should be used to carry out the assignment of replacing the system of white supremacy with justice, and going further than that, producing the quality people that we should have been in the first place, and everybody should be from the day that they are born to the day that they expire. A universal man or a universal woman. What do I mean by that? I mean people who every move that they make has a constructive result. I'm going to keep using that term because that's the focus. We are people who don't have a focus other than just say, you know, we're black people and we count too, without explaining anything about what we count for. What do we have a philosophy? I mean, just being black, I mean, that's automatic. And just going around saying, can't you see I'm black? And then having nothing else to say, well, what would that mean to anybody? That wouldn't mean anything to a Martian. Somebody just got here from another planet. Say, yeah, I see that, you know, you're black or you're blue or you're purple. You know, I see you're short or tall or whatnot. But what else you got other than that? And that's kind of what we kind of rested on in the 1960s and 70s, because we really didn't have any direction about what we were going to do about anything. Dr. Martin Luther King's last book was entitled what? Where do we go from here? That's a question. And nobody came up with an answer. Because did we ever figure out where we were supposed to be going? Well, we get together. Now, how many times have we heard that as a solution to a problem? Getting together. I, for one, say I hope I never hear that term used again, ever, under any circumstance, unless you can say get together and do what? And I want every detail filling in those blanks. That's what every black person should want. Get together and do what? Well, just get together. We black people got to get together. I mean, we just been so far apart, and we all spaced out, and we just got to get together. So we go to all kind of hotel conferences, and everybody who comes to the mic, and I've been to a bunch of them, that's what I hear over and over again. Well, what we got to do now, what we got to do, is everybody ready for this? Get your pencil and paper out and write this down. What we got to do is, here it comes, get together. And then you roll your eyes at the ceiling and roll your eyes at the audience and just poke out your mouth and make it look like you're really serious this time. And then after a 7-day conference talking about black people's problems, that's what you come away with. We got to get together. We got to get together. That shouldn't come off of no black person's lips again in 2021 and going forward forever. Say something else. But that get-together should go out the window. We got to get together. Where's the plan? Get together and do what? When? What date? Set some perimeters. The white supremacists say, hey, we're going to do this by January the 3rd. No excuses. No stumbling. We've got 12 things we're going to do, and we're going to get it done. We're going to the moon, we're going to get it done. And we got a time frame. We don't just go around like a Negro talking about we got to get together. We got to get together. Now, this time we got together. Find out different ways to make your voice tremble when you say it. Well, this time we got to get together. Stop it. We need a razor-sharp code where we are precision. That's what I mean by ultimate man and ultimate woman. People who are totally scientific. We just don't throw a word or throw words around, sounding good, getting everybody all worked up and turning flips and beating on tambourines and whatnot. That was okay, I guess, back when we didn't know anything at all, and we're pretty close to that now. But there's such a thing as doing better. And there's also such a thing as doing the job that needs to be done, every job, and having a time frame for getting it done and a code for getting there. That's what I say in this program and all others that I'm on. We need a code, and I'm trying to write one. And they'll say, well, Fuller, you're doing all this talking, you're doing the same thing. Well, at least I'm laying out something like black people are not supposed to even talk to each other unless they have something constructive to say. Random talk should be a thing of the past. That should be known all over the world. Black people don't do that at all. Don't do that at all. You just don't have a random conversation with a black person. I mean, if you start off with them with that stuff, they're going to go silent. They're going to be polite. They'll be courteous, but they'll go silent and let you do all the talking. If you ain't talking nothing but trash and random talk and whatnot, you'll just be talking to yourself because they're not going to say nothing until you finally, after 2 or 3 days of all that trash talk or random talk or what you call ghetto talk, you finally say something about getting something done that's going to do what? Produce a constructive result. Then that black person will then engage in a conversation with you. But that should be a part of our code starting right this minute, worldwide. Black people don't do random talk, period. They're like ice when it comes. The minute you start talking random talk, gossip and all like that, they button up. And they put distance between you and them because they're not looking for the conflict either. All right? Because you might wonder why they're not saying nothing, and then you're going to make an issue out of that. But all of a sudden, they're going to have something else to do because you're not saying anything of constructive value. We carry a lot of poison, and we need to dump it today, right this minute. Practice dumping it because we got a lot of it in us. We don't need to carry no more of it around because it breeds nothing that is of constructive value, and we've become known as the most non-constructive people that ever existed everywhere on the planet.
Okay, hold that thought, Dr. Fuller. We will be right back after this short break here on The Opposite Effect. Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. Stay tuned. All right, and we are back. Thank you for staying tuned here with Dr. Neely Fuller Jr., The Opposite Effect with Rami J. Phone calls after a while, so just hang on tight. We see the phone lines lighting up. I ain't forgot about you. Okay, we know you want to get your questions across to Dr. Fuller. It's a rare chance, a great chance to finally get your voice heard by Dr. Fuller, all right? And we're going to see them lighting up. Don't worry, we will get to your calls in a minute. Dr. Fuller, back to what we were discussing. Now, one question came up in the studio. Someone asked, do we actually need white people in order to solve the race problem currently here in America? Or can we do it ourselves? I mean, if we're powerful people, can't we do it ourselves? Or do we actually need the help of white people?
Yes, because if we're going to solve the race problem, that's if we figure that white people are still going to be here on the planet, we have to have some type of interaction. And we're going to have some type of interaction just right now. During this COVID-19, you got to interact with white people. And white people have to interact with us. Now, there are those who say, no, we need to be completely separated. I don't argue with them because the code does not allow me to do that. I'm just saying I do have a question. How? So in answer to the question about do we have to interact with white people, certainly. So it comes down to what type of interaction? Quality interaction, meaning what? So we don't keep using too many words to say the same thing, because that's a part of a code too. Constructive results. See, and we don't say anything to white people any different from what we say to black people. It's all the same thing. Why? Because we're centered on, rather than having things like racism and other forms of mistreatment, we want things like justice to replace it. Justice is all about getting constructive results out of every move you make. Well, that wouldn't include white people. So if we're talking to white people or talking to black people or talking to any people, all we want to know is, okay, we're talking about doing this and doing that, and the plan calls for this, that, and other. What's going to be the constructive result, sir or ma'am? That's it. It's always going to lead to those two words. Those two words should stick in our minds forever, into infinity. Constructive results. That's the only thing that's going to count in the future, as far as we are concerned, from here on, and try to make the whole world get on that same page, or entice the whole world, or ask the whole world, rather, including all the white people. You know, we talk about this and talk about that. Well, we're going to climb Mount Everest. All right. So, okay, we're not going to argue about that, whether we're going to climb Mount Everest this week or not. But what's going to be the constructive result? And don't interfere with the answer. Don't start arguing about the answer. Just be ready with the next question. Because out of every question, you want that answer to be able to produce a constructive result. Now, the theory is, and I think the logic is, and I think anybody listening to this program, if they ever tried, every problem that is ever solved is going to be through the process of questions and answers. So stay in that question lane, because black people, more than anybody on the planet, should have more questions than anybody on the planet. Why? Because we have more problems than anybody on the planet. So the way to solve problems is through the process of questions and answers. There's never been a problem solved anywhere in the known universe by anybody, including all the creatures, talking about snails and frogs and birds and flies. Never has there been a problem solved without a question and an answer, followed by another question and an answer, and another question and an answer. And that's how you get to what? The final answer that does what? Produces a result. And the result is going to be either what or what? Either constructive or non-constructive. There's no such thing as in between when you start talking about results. You carry that 9mm around, and you got an attitude toward anybody that says something that you don't like, see what kind of results you're going to get. You got the 9mm, so you can take care of anybody's attitude on a one-on-one basis. But that will be Act 1. Black people are real good at Act 1. Maybe, just maybe, pretty good, but usually not usually, at Act 2. But we can carry out Act 1 big time. Like if you're talking about a 3-act play, black people are real good. Man, we know how to burst on the stage. And then by Act 2, we start kind of, I'm beginning to get my lines all messed up. And by Act 3, we through booking. In other words, the theater shuts down, and it shuts down on us. The curtain drops, and it drops on our heads because we don't think things through. That's what I mean by Act 1, 2, and 3. Black people never get beyond Act 1. Oh, yeah, we know how to really put on a show in Act 1. By Act 2, we're exhausted. And by Act 3, we ain't coming back no more. This show will not open next week. We through booking. And we do that over and over again. So we want a code that goes on and on and on. There is no end. Things just keep getting better and better and better and better and better, and even past perfection. As somebody said in something called the Constitution, I think, a more perfect union, more perfect. That's reaching for something. When you can get more perfect, wow, more perfect. You already got the perfect. Now you will get more perfect. Someone actually said that. That's written somewhere. I've seen it. Talking about a union. So we should be constructive results. Well, Fuller, how can you get more constructive and ultimately constructive? Ultimately constructive. Well, think about it anyway. It might be such a thing as being past ultimate, past perfection, and enjoying every minute of it. Because why not enjoy it? We have been taught to enjoy nothing but things that are destructive. That's the system of white supremacy that does that. That's why black people enjoy, like we said in the early part of this hour, killing each other. That's enjoyment. That's fun. That satisfies three of the things that all creatures want: fun, glory, and material comfort. Well, we don't get a lot of material comfort out of it, but we get that initial rush, just like you do. That's why we have so many of us on drugs. We're looking for that high. We're not thinking about Act 2 after that, but we get that high. All right? So we get that adrenaline. You know, you pull the trigger on that 9mm about 5 times. Boy, you see 3 or 4 people drop, and you jump in the car and tear down the street. Boy, that's a high. That's a rush. That's Act 1. Now, Act 2, you got about 17 cars trailing you and 4 helicopters. Then there's a shootout in somebody's farm, and most of the guns are pointed at you. That's Act 2. Your final act. All in the same day. Negro thinking. We need a code. A code that does what? Every time you follow it, it's something that works, that produces a constructive result for you and for anybody you're associated with. That's what we need. And we should be working on one. I hope that I'm putting forth part of one right now. No contact, no conflict. All contacts must be constructive, whether you're making contact with white people, black people, involving white people. Sure, get white people involved, but you want to know one thing: what's going to be the constructive result? If they're just going to come up like in the old days, going to come to the Cotton Club up in Harlem and shake some booty, I mean, well, let's ask a question about that. Is that constructive? Is that all there is? As the song, the singer, or white singer, Patty Page, is that all there is? Is that all there is to go into Harlem on a Saturday night? Is anybody up in Harlem doing anything constructive in 1930? In 2021? Is it producing constructive results? And if so, how? Where is the constructive result? Whatever it is.
Right, and it's should be recognized that the white people that are around you or that live around you that you don't see, that surround your communities and with the surrounding suburbs and the surrounding states and even around the world, they're all on code. It's a global code that white people are on. I mean, call it what you will, but they are on code. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. The code of the white supremacists is white supremacy, and they follow their code rigidly. By the time the average white person, 15 years old, is 15 years old, they know the white code. They don't know all the details of how to act and react, what to say, what not to say, under what conditions, what to do, what not to do. But they're the most unique people on the planet because they go according to a code. Now, it's an evil code, the white supremacist code, because it's designed to do what? To destroy people of color. But as far as material things are concerned, the white code is the strongest and most efficient in the world when it comes to handling things. When it comes to handling people of color, and a whole lot of white people for that matter, it is extremely destructive and purely evil, even though it produces things. But the quality of people that it produces, even people who look like they are quality people, you might call good people. The white supremacist system does not produce any good people at all. And with black people coming up under the white supremacists, and basically we imitate them, everything from gang banging to booty shaking. We didn't invent that. I mean, you know, and even if we did, I mean, is that producing constructive results? All right. But as far as material things are concerned, the white supremacists, in answer to the question, do they have a code? They have the strongest, most efficient code that the world has ever seen.
Hold that thought, Dr. Fuller. We will return after this short break with your phone calls for Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. here on The Opposite Effect with Rami J. Stay tuned. All right. Welcome back to The Opposite Effect. Special guest, Dr. Neely Fuller Jr., author of the Uniter Compensatory Code System Concept. I'm your host, Rami J. Dr. Fuller, we are going to take a couple of phone calls. We have the boards lighting up. People are ready and revving to go. We want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Straight Fire channel and also Mr. Dotson's Neighborhood and Read Network. All right. Please subscribe, like, and share this video and interview. Repost and do what you will with it. All right. So, first caller on the line, we have Johnny from Long Beach, California. Hello, Johnny. You are on the line with Dr. Fuller. Go ahead with your question, Johnny, from Long Beach.
Thanks for taking my call. Mr. Fuller, you said just a few minutes ago that white supremacy is like when black people copy the way they. Are you saying that when black people copy the way they talk to people, the way they act? Is that what you're saying? Using the same bigoted language that a white person would use. Would you say that would be a?
Well, we use the English language, and the people that call themselves English people were white people and throughout the world, and then many white people spoke what you call the Euro languages. English was one of them, Germanic languages, different type of Euro language they call it, but it's not just the language, the sounds itself. All languages kind of merge into each other. If people are around each other long enough, they borrow from each other. But that's not okay. I should have been clearer. Okay, I'm saying that. Say a hypothetical situation. Now this is two different issues.
a black man is attacking a white man with racial insult, and then a white man is turned, and he does the same to a black man. Now, it's a rule that black people can't be racist. However, could it be the word racist, the way it's used today, is being diminished, just like the N word used to be, in the dictionary, it used to be referring to as an ignorant person, and now it refers to as black people. What I'm saying is, so what I'm saying is, like, can words start to diminish through time?
The question is, can words do what?
Start to diminish in their meanings.
Words change in their meanings all the time. That's why I'm saying it's not so much the words themselves. Words are nothing but tools. In other words, what is a tool for? It's to accomplish a result. So that result is either going to be constructive or non-constructive. That's why I keep centering on those two words, constructive results. So any words that you use, think of a word as a tool, like a pair of pliers, or like a shovel. You pick up a shovel and you say, well, what is this? Well, that's a shovel. Well, what's a shovel? Well, it's a tool. Well, a tool for doing what? Oh, well, usually for things like, we got different types of shovels. We got some for shoveling snow, for moving snow. If it's snowing, you move the snow from the sidewalk to the street, and you can do this, and then somebody will show you how to use the shovel. A word is no different. Pair of pliers, a screwdriver. So whenever you use a word, the word should do the job that you think the job should do, and that job should always have a what? Constructive result. That's what you center on, not so much the tool itself. But if that tool doesn't do that job, then you need another tool.
Okay, Mr.
So,
okay. No,
yes, sir, go right ahead.
Okay, what I wanted to take out of that analogy that I gave you. So, if I understand you correctly, you're saying in both of those scenarios, you help the person that needs the most help, right? Irrespective of what race they are. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, sir. Always. That's the definition of justice, the compensatory. That's the definition I made up, because I didn't like any of the definitions I saw in every encyclopedia, every dictionary. So I just made up one in 1994. It means guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. And I'm saying that's never been achieved by anybody, but it is achievable here on this planet.
And so would you explain that just now? I think I understand exactly what racism is, and I really appreciate you making it clear for me that the way I think is like I'm thinking the same way you think, and I appreciate it. So thanks for taking my call.
Well, thank you, sir, but that's not what I'm seeking. I'm not seeking consensus. One of the titles of my textbook is called Thought, Speech, and Action. Think, speak, then act in order to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. It's never been done. That's why we're having these conversations today by anybody. The system of white supremacy is still in place. So therefore, everybody's opinion must be given regard. I ask that my opinion be given the same regard as everybody else's, white or non-white, because nobody has ever solved the race problem. So everybody's voice should be heard and everybody's viewpoint. And people shouldn't be shouted down on account of, particularly like their viewpoint of how to go about solving the problem when nobody has solved the problem. So you never can tell when somebody will walk in and take a look at it and say, hey, I can wrap this thing up in about 15 minutes. And they push a few buttons and the problem is solved. Somebody might do that. And everybody's mouth will be hanging open, including mine. But I'll be pleased, because that's the whole point. The whole point is not to win arguments, but to solve problems. That's the difference between an argument and a conversation. The purpose of an argument is to win arguments. The purpose of a conversation, which is what we're supposed to be having here under the code rules or laws, you might say, what we're supposed to be having here is not an argument, but a conversation where we can disagree with each other. That's okay. That's all a part of it. As long as we come up with the truth and then finally solve the problem. Constructive results, that's what we're looking for. A conversation produces constructive results. An argument just produces more argument.
All right. The phone lines are still open here at the Opposite Effect. Next caller, we have Kevin from Oklahoma. Kevin, you are on the phone with Dr. Neely Fuller Jr.
Thank you so much for taking my call. Mr. Fuller, I may have missed this. You may have talked about it early, and if you did, I apologize. I got in a little late. But in your book that I'm reading, and I'm reading it, you explain that there's no such thing as an American, an African, and Asian. Explain to me, what do you mean by that?
Logically speaking. Now, people who call themselves that, the code also says, because you're not looking for an argument, you're not looking for fights. We already got a fight. We don't need no more of that. So if a person says that they're an Asian, you call them an Asian. That's what they want to be called. But generally speaking, according to logic, there's no such thing as an American, no such thing as an African, and no such thing as an Asian. There's no definition that makes sense when you start talking about an American, an African, or an Asian. Just take the word American to start with. When you say American, whom are you talking about? Which people? You even got a classification of a football player called an All-American. Now, if a football player is an All-American, what are the other people who are Americans? Are they a percentage of an American? What percentage? Based on what? Whether or not they play football? See, that thing about American is all over the place. America is a concept. Africa is a concept. And Asia is a concept. According to what? Neely Fuller? No, according to logic. Now, what is the concept? African, American, Asian. It's all the same concept. They are people who practice justice. Now, we get to the answer to the question. Does anybody practice justice? No. Practicing justice in the system of white supremacy is impossible, because the system of white supremacy is opposed to justice. So if an American, an African, or an Asian are people who practice justice, then you cannot have Africans, Americans, or Asians in a system that is non-just. That's the logic. Not because Neely Fuller says so, but because that's impossible. You cannot have an American, an African, or an Asian, because these are people who practice justice. Africans, Americans, and Asians are people who practice justice. They have to be that. Otherwise, why be anything? If you don't practice justice, you're just a person that doesn't practice justice. I don't care what kind of title you got. You're just a mistreater. A mistreater is a mistreater. I mean, there's nothing special about you if you mistreat people, other than you being a mistreater. According to what? Logic. So Americans, Africans, and Asians are not mistreaters because they practice justice. But since nobody can practice justice in the system of white supremacy, because the system of white supremacy is opposed to anybody practicing justice, meaning guaranteeing that no person is mistreated, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. That doesn't happen in the system of white supremacy.
Hold that thought, Dr. Fuller. We will return shortly with more The Opposite Effect. Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. All right. Welcome back to The Opposite Effect with Rami J. Special guest, Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. This is the interview. The interview we have been anticipating for quite a while. So mark this one down in your calendars, good people. Remember to like, share, subscribe to our channel. Share this video. Dr. Neely Fuller Jr., please continue to elaborate for our caller here. I believe you also had a follow-up question. Thank you.
Yes. American, African, Asian, all the same thing. It's the same concept. People who practice justice. There's no point in saying you're an Asian if you don't practice justice. There's no logical reason to call yourself a proud American or an African or your African ancestry if you're not practicing justice. I mean, no title really fits you other than a title of a person who is non-just. That one title fits all. And you can get in any kind of court case, anything else, by going by those titles, unless somebody comes up with a different type of title for, and there will people who will do that. They will say, well, no, an Asian is, oh, no, I mean, that's not what that means. That doesn't have anything to do with justice. Or an African, I mean, well, wait a minute. Why be one? If you're going to go around carrying flags and all like that, it must mean, you know, you're advertising. You say when you start talking about what an American is, you're talking about people that believe in justice. All your court system is set up that way. If you're in Indonesia and you say you're in Asia, you'll say, oh, yes, we believe in justice. And if you're in China or if you're in the so-called Middle East, oh, yes, everybody believes in justice. Oh, well, then, since everybody believes in justice in all these places, then by definition, that's what you are. People who practice justice, which means you guarantee that no person is mistreated, and you guarantee that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, you got all kind of fancy terms that are synonymous with it, like fair play, but I never liked those terms to be associated with justice, and it's not because I just didn't like them. It's because scientifically, when you say fair is associated with what? Not the word justice, even though we say that it is. Fair, playing fair, doing the fair thing. I mean, a fair play. It also says, my fair lady. How about that? Well, what do you mean by fair lady? Well, light skin. Oh, white. Oh. So justice is white. See how the tricky language that we use all the time and not aware of it? Like that term dark that keeps showing up in the English language. I hear it every day. It runs right past the average black person. The way the word dark is used. Start paying attention to it. The code requires pay attention to words. Every word. Don't skip past nothing. Don't let nothing skip past you. But in answer to the question, I can go on and on and on by just that word dark. Just every time you hear it, look at the context in which it is used. Just look at it. Listen to it. Presidents use it and all like that. Well, we're facing some dark days ahead. And then you start talking about dark people right behind it. That becomes, then you associate the word dark with what? What you're taught at Halloween. Dark is evil. Goblins. Death. Dark. Death. Dark. Death. Death. Dark. But let's get back to American, African, and Asian. Same thing. If it doesn't mean people who practice justice, it doesn't mean anything at all. So you look at the people, not the label, and look at what they're doing. And when you look at people, always look for just one thing: constructive results. Even when you start talking about beauty, just don't look at the surface of the person. Think about constructive results.
Caller, are you
listening
there?
Closely, and I'm still going to have to think that over a bit. And I'm reading your book, and I'm sure that some of the things that you're saying will soak in later, but that's going to be one that I'm going to have to think about for a while. But I do certainly appreciate you're taking my questions, and I'm going to hang up and listen to the remainder of your show. Thank you.
I appreciate you listening, sir, and I also appreciate it if you thoroughly disagree with me, and then give a reason why. Because I'm all ears. I always say part of the code is I'm still learning. You stop learning and start thinking you know everything, you have already made a huge mistake. According to what? According to logic, that's what. We don't even know half of what we ought to know. Or 1/10 of 1/10 of 1/10. And I'm talking about everybody that ever existed. We haven't even begun to learn all the things we need to know. None of us.
All right. And there you have it. We have Sister Leona from Michigan on the line. Sister Leona, Dr. Neely Fuller Jr.
Thanks for taking my call. Greetings, Mr. Fuller, sir.
Greetings.
I have a question and but first a quick comment. Listen, with this current situation with the SARS-CoV-2, otherwise known as the COVID-19 infection, whatever, it really kind of brought it home to me on another level about how powerless and how subject I am to this system of white supremacy, and how the white supremacists are calling the shots. No pun intended there. In terms of, in some way, coercing people to get this injection. And that's a personal, private decision on everyone. I understand that's a personal health decision. But, it kind of brought it to another level to me about, yes, I am a prisoner of war. And I found that to be so painful to face that reality. So painful to face that reality. But I'm grateful that you wrote your book, and I do study it. And my question to you is, the use of language keeps this system of white supremacy in place. I think I understood you to say that at one point. Can you elaborate that on more? And the other question is, when you realized that you were a prisoner of war, did it hurt you?
I'm saying if you're black, you're born in prison. So that's the war I'm talking about. It's not really one war. Those who believe in white supremacy and those who don't. That's the war for a black person. All these different things like the Civil War, which doesn't make sense at all. No such thing as a civil war. How can a war be civilized? I mean, it's just the terms we use. We've been tricked into using it. Make no sense at all. But you don't say they don't make sense. Say if you go into a college or something like that, you just raise your hand, and I'm saying this for the benefit of students. The code covers that. I mean, in a classroom, that's when you can do your best work in using the code and find out a whole lot of things and maybe help the class move along, too. Ask questions. They say, why is the Civil War called civil? And don't argue about the answer. Just wait. And let the professor wrestle with it. Sir, ma'am, why is a civil war called civil? Now, I've digressed from what you were saying a while ago, so that's another thing. Don't let Neely Fuller get away from you either, because he'll do that. I'll start. You'll ask a question about one thing, and I'll start talking about something else. You got to guard against that, even when I do it. Why? Because the white supremacists are experts at that. You ask one question, and they'll give you the answer to a whole bunch of other questions that you didn't ask. They are experts at that. I've seen it happen over and over again. It has happened to me. And I walked away and said, you know what? He still didn't answer my question. But he did it so slick. Man, I got taken. But we always wind up the Negro scratching his head, and that includes me. But I have a tendency to do it, but I do it not intentionally. It's just that I just happen to do it. I'm trying to think of so many things at once when I'm talking on a program like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to get back to your original question. What was it?
Okay. Did you experience pain when you realized the reality of your situation? When you realized the full impact that yes, this is a system, a global system of racism, white supremacy, and its major function is to strip me of all self-respect and kill me as often as it can. Forgive me if I'm not wording it right. That was one question, and the other question was the use of language. How does language keep the system of white supremacy up and running? How does language do that?
Because people are motivated by words. Adolf Hitler understood that.
Okay, hold that thought, Dr. Fuller. We will be right back. Let's pay a couple more bills here at The Opposite Effect. I'm your host, Rami J. Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. will return to answer more of your questions. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back to The Opposite Effect with Rami J. Special guest, Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. Listeners, audience, please don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe. Please email us, ramijphoto@gmail.com, for any media production services needs that you may have, audio or visual, podcast services as well. Dr. Fuller, please continue to elaborate for our caller, and I believe she had a couple of more questions. Please continue, sir.
Yes, the white supremacists manipulate people with words, or by manipulation. What does manipulation do? When you say things to people in such a way that what happens? Confusion. So the white supremacists are the masters of words, and they know how to use words in such a way that they confuse their victims. So, what's the result of confusion? According to logic and evidence, the result of confusion is people don't know what to do. They run here, they run there. When you see people confused, a confused situation is a situation that most people don't know how to deal with and don't want to deal with it. And so a person who knows how to confuse people will be what? Logically speaking, the master of those people. So the white supremacists learn by the use of words that they could confuse people, non-white people, very easily. That's why in folklore, they say the people who are called Native Americans or Indians say they speak with forked tongue. Say one thing, mean another. Very confusing. Make your head hurt. Make your head hurt big time when they start talking to you, because they know how to confuse you. And they're just sitting there, blandly, talking. But the talk is causing your mind to become confused. So when you get up from the talk, you get up not really knowing what to do. And when people don't know what to do, they go back to the person who did what? Confused them in the first place. Now the white supremacists know they got you. Say they walked away from me confused, which is exactly what I wanted them to do. Which means when they get out there in the world the way it is, they're going to find contradictions because I put those contradictions in their minds. So they're going to have to come back to me again to straighten out the confusion because I got their minds following what I told them. So when they come back to me, I'm going to give them some more words that I already got set up because I know what they're going to ask. I know how they're going to be scratching their heads. The head-scratching Negro. Old cartoons show that over and over again. So the great white supremacists say, oh, you're confused about what I told you. Well, let me make it simple for you. So they give you some more words. And those words are even more confusing than the first words you got. So you walk away the second time and you're more confused. Now, what are they doing? They are creating power over you because the laws of logic say that the person who is the most confused will be dependent on the person who is the least confused. And that's the law of the universe. The white supremacists are experts at causing confusion among their victims so that their victims remain victims forever.
Mr. Fuller, what is the reason you think it's painful to face the truth? Why does that cause pain? I don't, what does logic say about that?
Well, in answer to the question, black people have suffered so much pain that if the truth hurts, we don't want the truth. We want to be told lies. Well, that's why we get on drugs so easily. We have gone through so much pain. All we want is relief from pain. That's natural and whatnot. But we want relief from pain at any cost. And if it's just going to cost Neely Fuller, I came to this conclusion, some pain to face the truth that he's a prisoner of war. And so Neely Fuller got a choice now. He can act like he's not a prisoner of war, which is going to make his situation even more painful because now he's already crazy. He's going to be crazier because the system of white supremacy makes their victims crazy. But anytime you start running from the truth because it's painful, you're putting yourself into greater jeopardy than you were before. Pain serves a purpose. The creator of the universe put pain into the universe. Pain is an alarm bell. You're supposed to have pain when something is out of order. See, that's another way of looking at pain. Oh, yeah, when you're being whipped, or when you step on a nail, or when you're driving, that tire cries out in pain when it starts going flat, and the entire vehicle is crying out in pain. It starts rattling and making noise. Why? Because you got one tire that's got a nail in it, and it's slowly going flat. And you're rolling along real nice, and then in a few miles, the whole car is shaking. Now, what does that mean? You step on the gas? No. Pull over to the side, even though it's very inconvenient. And that's what we don't want. We don't want that inconvenience, because that's what the truth does. It gives us inconvenience. But you are fixing to do what? Change that tire. Put a tire on that doesn't have a nail in it. And then you can continue your journey. But if you keep driving on that flat tire and the car is coming apart, the engine's practically falling out of the bottom of it, now you have made a terrible situation worse because you didn't want to do what? Face the truth. So pain is an alarm bell, like a fire alarm going off in a building. You say, I got all my papers stacked up here. What am I going to do? The fire alarm went off. Now, it's painful. You don't want to leave those papers because you went off and left them. Now the building burned down, and the paperwork got all burned up in it, but you didn't get burned up. So it's painful to have to start all over again. But that's the remedy. You couldn't carry the papers out, not and save yourself. So you save yourself as the most constructive result of having that fire. You were able to save yourself. Because if you can't save yourself, paperwork's not going to matter no way.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Sister Leona from Michigan. Next, we have Dubay from Maryland. Dubay?
How you doing, Neely Fuller? It's a pleasure to be on the call with you. Been listening to this program for about 6 years now. First time I heard you, I understood your logic. Plain and simple. No confusion in anything that you say at all. But for some of us that listen to you and call in and ask questions and try to convolute what you say, it's a bit of an issue with me. So just like our good brother who called in from California, try to listen to what you said and then try to say you both were saying the same things, and clearly you were not. And I'm glad you pointed that out. He, just like myself, I have people who are classified as mixed race in my family. So I think for him that's a soft spot. So you always want to put these classified white people in our group when we talk about things like race and people who need the most help. So he's breaking it down to an individualistic thing. But when I hear you and listen to people like Professor Dr. Rami Fox, who has a book called Addicted to White, I'm hearing the collective. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. When I hear people who need the most help, I'm hearing a group, a collectivism. So I was just begging you to break it down beyond the logic, very elementary for some of us who don't get it or want to get it. Just use the color code. Say black people, white people, and then let them know this is what I'm saying, a group of people who need help the most. Because when it's just blanketed and said, okay, well, this producing justice about those who need help the most, some of us are going to take that and say, okay, well, this homeless white person, he needs help the most, so why not let's give it to all these homeless white people? And I don't think that's what you're saying. Folks who have suffered the most in this country, we know who we are. So people who are listening in, you have to understand what Neely Fuller is saying to people like him. We are the folks who need help the most. We are the folks who need the most justice. So I'm just begging you to break it down for us even more simplistic. And also for people who think on the lines of some of our brothers and sisters when it comes to their dealings with white people, how do we deal with some of the people in our community who are not working to help us in this so-called black community, African community, produce justice, when they are working against or with the system to work against us? How do you think, in your estimation judgment, that we need to either deal or not so deal with these folks? I'll take my answer on there. Thank you.
Well, wait a minute. Here again, you said so much. I didn't get the core of your question. So what is the question?
Okay, so the first question
How
really
do we
is...
what?
Oh, well, how do we deal with some people in our community, like you mentioned before, who just want to probably gather and either just march and think they're doing something, when in return, and in reality, they're not really helping us to achieve black liberation? How do we deal with folks in the community who work against our better interests as black folks? How do we deal with other black classified people in our community who are working against our liberation and for us to achieve justice?
We get rid of a whole lot of excess words. That's why I said we need a code. So, what are the words we do leave, we work with?
Hold that thought right there, Dr. Fuller. We will be right back here with more The Opposite Effect with Rami J, Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. Stay tuned. We're back here at The Opposite Effect. Dr. Neely Fuller Jr., blowing our minds completely. I'm your host, Rami J. We have Dubay still on the phone here. I want to remind the listeners to like, comment, and share. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Why not? Hit us up for any of the services that we provide. We do provide production services for podcasting, video production, audio production, music production, whatever dreams you may have. We can help you bring them to light. All right. Dr. Fuller, please continue to elaborate for Dubé.
Yes. When you start getting lost in a conversation or it looks like an argument is fixing to start, and among black people, there's always the potential for that real quick, particularly an argument. Arguments are designed to produce more arguments. That's the nature of arguments. Conversations are designed, a codified conversation, to solve problems, produce constructive results. That's the difference between an argument and a conversation. Black people should be out of the business altogether of having arguments. So you don't try to convince anybody of anything. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything on this show. I want to announce that for sure. I'm just throwing some ideas out there about what is needed, what's the best way to get something done that will do what? Produce a constructive result. So, here in the textbook for victims of white supremacy that you can get by going to producejustice.com, on page 171 and 172, I say when you get lost, and these are instructions in answer to the question, whenever you come up with a question like what you just asked me, you can just go to page 171 and 172 of the textbook for victims of racism, if you have one. On that, on page 171, at the bottom of the page, it says, every day, all day, wherever you are, ask yourself these 4 basic questions. 4 questions. That's what they are. What do I want to do? Number 2, why do I want to do what I want to do? That's a why. Why do I want to do what I want to do? Number 3, how do I plan to do what I want to do? Number 4, what do I expect the constructive result to be? The constructive result to be of what? What I want to do. What I want to do should produce a constructive result. I don't have any business, logically speaking, for wanting to do it in the first place. If it's not going to produce a what? Constructive result. Now, this is the question that you can ask anybody when it looks like what you're saying to them is going to lead to an argument. You don't have to think about what the person's motive is. See, black people are always reading something in the other black people's motives. And then, we're already, and that's a recipe for an argument. Forget about the motive. Forget about who's saying what and what their title is or what you think their station in quote unquote in life is. Just go straight to codification. That's why I say we need a rigid code that we don't deviate from. And it will apply to everybody, white and non-white. And you can paraphrase it, those 4 questions, by saying, not starting with yourself, what do I want to do? But you can ask the person, what do you want to do, sir? Always be polite. Or ma'am. Always be polite. Don't let anybody be more courteous than you. That's a part of the code. In any setting where you're talking to people, don't let anybody be more courteous than you. You might slip up every now and then, but always think about that. Nobody, it's 100 people in the room. You're going to be, when it comes to courtesy, you're going to be the most courteous person in the room, no matter what happens. And so that's a part of the code. Okay. And just make up your mind. That's the way you're going to do it. Now, but those 4 questions, you can paraphrase it by not saying, what is it that I want to do, which is what you always start with every day that you are breathing. But you can ask the person, particularly if the person is becoming belligerent and the person seems like they're challenging you, which black people will do. Black people will challenge each other in a minute. You already know that. You already know that. So that's a given. Don't try to stop that, because in trying to stop it, that's not going to work the way we usually do it, because that just escalates an argument. You're not looking for another argument. You're looking for a conversation that will solve problems. So you ask the person, sir, what do you want to do? See, everybody wants to do something every second of the day, every creature, every alligator, every snail. Sir, what do you want to do? And let the person tell you. And don't argue about the answer. That's important to remember. Just move to the second question after you get the answer to the first question, but never move to the second question until you get an answer to the first question. And you can let the person politely know that. You never move to the second question if the first question is not answered. Why? Because if you try to move to the second question before answering the first question, you're going to get what? Confusion. And you don't ever want confusion in a conversation. So, what do you want to do, sir? What do you want to do? Why do you want to do what you want to do? How do you plan to do what you want to do? Usually people who want to do something, they got an idea of some type of plan. But you don't move to that fourth question until that third question is answered. How do you have a plan? How do you plan it? And listen for the answer. But don't argue about the answer. That's real important. Just be ready with the next question. And the next question is the clincher. That's the round-out question. What do you expect the constructive result to be? Now, if you get lost, you can go to page numbers 171, 172, and those four questions will fit any occasion. The questions and the answers you get will solve any problem in the universe as far as questions and answers are concerned.
Hold that thought, Dr. Fuller. We will be back with more of The Opposite Effect. Stay tuned. Don't you go anywhere. Back here with more of The Opposite Effect with Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. And we have another caller on the line. Hold on one second. Ed from D.C. Ed from D.C., you're on the line with Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. Go ahead with your question.
Mr. Fuller, constructive result or non-constructive result? That's the bottom line. Yes?
Or constructive results?
Or non-constructive results?
Yes, that's the bottom line in every circumstance. Every move that every creature makes. Every minute of the day.
Okay.
Example, if you're sitting and having a plate of food, when you get up from that table,
I want to get this question in.
Yes, sir.
I was born in the 70s. So when I came into existence, there was a lot of non-constructive results already here, like a legacy of non-constructive results. Should I try to oppose the non-constructive results, or should I just continue my life of producing constructive results?
In answer to the question, are you supposed to be opposed to non-constructive results? Yes. And if you're supposed to be practicing your actions and your thoughts, your speech, you're supposed to be producing constructive results. If the results are not constructive, you just go back to the drawing board and find out how you can make them constructive. Because every move you're supposed to be making is supposed to have constructive results.
Okay,
that's
so
the way to go. Everything in the universe is either going to be non-constructive or constructive. There's no such thing as in between.
Okay. So in your discussion of economy, using my time and energy, do I have time and energy to oppose Or should I just concern myself with continuing to do things that produce constructive results?
Oh yes, you're always trying to produce constructive results. See, constructive results will eliminate non-constructive results. That's just the laws of logic. I mean, if you're doing something constructive,
I shouldn't even entertain the non-constructive results all around me.
No, you try to influence everybody that you're around by asking the questions that I said on page 171. And that bottom line question is, you can ask anybody, white, non-white, male, female, is what they're talking about, what they're doing, what they're getting you involved in. Is it going to produce a constructive result? And so those four questions will lead you to the answers every time. All you have to do is follow those four questions.
I want to thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, and thank you, Ed from D.C. Thank you very much for calling in to The Opposite Effect. Dr. Fuller, can you please explain to people how to get your book and the word guide?
You're going to producejustice.com. That's producejustice.com. I'm going to repeat that again. Producejustice.com. Write it down, and all the information is there about the book and a little added information about the addition to the book called a word guide, counter-racist codified word guide, how to use words, how not to use them, what questions to ask when other people use them, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, we need a code. That's the message I'm sending. But like I said, if you get the book and you get lost in any conversation with anybody, go to page 171 and 172 and just lock in on those four questions. They should scientifically take everybody right where they should be. It won't take everybody where they want to be, but it'll take everybody where they should be. The answers to those questions.
And the title of the book, one more time for the audience, Dr. Fuller.
Textbook Workbook for Victims of White Supremacy, or the Uniter Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, or a Compensatory Counter-Racist Code. Revised Expanded Edition is the one that's recommended. However, the original edition is there too. But all that is explained at producejustice.com.
Well, we'd like to extend a very, very warm thank you, Dr. Fuller, and we really appreciate your time and energy and efforts today. We will be following up with you, making sure that everything is good with you, Dr. Fuller.
Thank you, and thank the audience, and thank everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Fuller. And to the audience, we hope that you have enjoyed the interview with Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. Please tune in again, like, share, comment, subscribe. Please support the channel, and please support Dr. Neely Fuller Jr., producejustice.com. This has been your host, Rami J, The Opposite Effect. I'm out.